I'm Jade McNeil and welcome to the BEESPACE Podcast, your bi-weekly dose of business and property realness. No hype, no fluff, and definitely no BS. Just honest conversations about what it really takes to build something from nothing. So, hello. Here we go. Welcome back to the BEESPACE Podcast. And on this one, I would like to welcome my lovely guest, Laura. Hello, Laura.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I've been looking forward to doing this with you, sitting down. It feels like just a catch up with a friend as well. Us talking through all business stuff as well. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Do you know what I was thinking as well? Because obviously you and I have known each other for a while, and I'm sure it was probably about 2-3 years ago when I first may have mentioned to you, do you know what, I'd really like to start a podcast.
Yes, you did. I remember. And I think at that point you were still exploring exactly what you would be doing, what you would be discussing on it as well, weren't you? Yeah, exciting. It's here. It's live. It's great.
And now we're doing it. Now we're recording.
Yeah.
The best of it we can. So Laura, let's get going with this. So, this podcast is all about people sharing stories about how they've built something from nothing, essentially, and like what that takes and what the realities are. So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, where you are, what you do.
So I am Laura, married to Dan. We have 2 young children. Archie's coming up for 3. Izzy is 8 months now. So busy home life. And I also started a property investment company in 2020 in lockdown, and then purchased my first property in 2021. And since then have been adding to the portfolio with HMOs specifically, but a mixture of professionally owned and for professionals and for supported living. So we've got 2 different kinds.
Okay. So this is interesting. So take us back to pre-2020. What did life look like? What was the day job?
A day job originally was a hairdresser, which I think people find wild.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your hair always does look on point, though, to be fair.
only when you see me, I promise, not always. And then I made a shift from actually doing hairdressing to selling hair care products up and down length and breadth of England, and I covered Scotland as well and stuff. So I was on the road working for a company that's based local to me, but I was covering a huge area at the time. And I really enjoyed that, really enjoyed working on the road and building that business, if you like, for myself at the time. But then lockdown hit in 2020 when COVID happened, obviously, and then that was when the change started to happen really for me around then.
Were you furloughed?
I was furloughed because all hairdressing salons were shut down, weren't they?
Obviously. Oh yeah, you were some of the last, weren't you, to come back? Oh, I remember now. I had terrible roots. Terrible roots.
So we were all furloughed. Everyone that was doing the same kind of role as me, we were all furloughed, obviously. So that was when I had the time to do research and everything that I wanted to do. Then from that point, that's when things started to progress for me in the property side of things. At first, it was just like listening to the podcasts and reading things and thinking, oh, this would be good. Could this be me? And then from there, obviously developed into where we are now.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I know, for a lot of people, obviously, like COVID was horrendous, of course, but also there were some seeds that came out of it where people were allowed to have the time, weren't they, to kind of like think and mull over ideas. Fortunately for me, that was not the case because I was homeschooling, and that was not fun. Carry the scars to this day. So obviously, 2020, COVID, you're like, property development. So you mentioned there that you listened to some podcasts. Like, where did you start to really dig into research about kind of like, there's property development, right? But there's like a million different things you can do within it. Where did you begin?
Well, I think I just thought originally I'm trying to cast my mind back. When you can't remember what you didn't know. I think originally I just had this feeling that, because me and Dan had this pot of money that we always had kind of earmarked and thought, right, one day that's for owning some properties, a bit of a pension pot, that kind of thing, which was originally the plan. And we just both had really busy jobs and never sat down long enough to research how to use this wisely, and it felt a bit scary. So when I had this time, then there was some like just general Googling, reading blogs, maybe reading bits of information I could find here and there. Then I realised that this information was spilling over into Instagram. That was a platform that I was already using for, just personal things, just home stuff. And then as I started to come across more profiles and then read the information that was being put out there from them, people like, yourself and other people that have been doing it longer, I thought, there's a whole wealth of information here. So combined all of those things with reading podcasts. I signed up for, I can't remember which magazine it was now, like a subscription to a magazine. And it was just pulling information from everywhere that I could, basically. But I think I remember one of the main things, and I still do it now to a degree, but when I first started listening to podcasts, I think you'll always listen to things that you don't understand if you're just starting out. And I think something that, rather than just passively listening, when I would go for a walk or something, I would make notes on my phone of the things I didn't understand. And then I would go away and research those things, so that I wasn't just getting little bits of information, I was getting a stronger understanding of things the whole time. But I always thought I would just do some buy-to-lets and keep hold of those, and that would be that, really. I suppose originally I'd heard about the HMO strategy, but I think I just thought that would be way down the line for me. And it felt a bit too scary to kind of contemplate navigating that at first. So the plan originally was buy-to-let, which I know you're going to remember a conversation around it.
I do. So for full transparency for everybody, we worked together. I worked as your mentor for quite a while when you were first starting off. And as part of the first, round of conversations, we had a discussion about kind of like where we're at, the finances available, what your long-term goals were. And I think we worked out in about 30 minutes, we're not going to be able to get there with this buy-to-let strategy. And oh my God, don't you look back now and aren't you so pleased that I made you do HMOs? Because look what happened to buy-to-lets, like the interest rates just like quadrupled and just, oh my God, just caused such a problem for lots of buy-to-let portfolio owners. And we won't go into this too much now, but obviously the HMOs can withstand more because there's more cash flow there. So that did definitely work out, for the best, for sure, for you. Do you know what, though? As you talk about it, it really makes me think back, because I've been doing this quite a while now, and I've forgotten what it feels like to have that really excited energy right at the beginning, where you're like, oh, this, oh, that, and you're just like a sponge and you're absorbing, that's so exciting. That really beginning stages of kind of like, where am I going to go with the direction of this business that I want to build? Like, how did you kind of, going on to social media and stuff like that, did you have any kind of instinctive filter about things going on there? Did anything feel how did you define who you wanted to follow and who you wanted to trust on social media in those early stages?
I think it's difficult, isn't it? I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody about the smoke and mirrors that are constantly used on social media. I feel like I have a good filter for those things generally. As a person, I think it's from having a sales background. You have to read people quite well. Sure. I think you have to, you're always picking up on different pieces of information. So it's not just the conversation, it's everything surrounding it. And I think that definitely helps me face to face. It's harder when it's just online. So I try just to take things with a pinch of salt sometimes. But I think credibility will shine through. I think as well for me, I'm not impressed by
Lamborghinis.
Well, Lamborghinis.
Because anyone can get one on finance. Well,
I just think that real flashy or the look at me vibe.
Yeah. Showboating
Where it's
vibe. Yeah.
showboating. I'm just not.
Yeah.
It doesn't attract me. So I think instantly, because that doesn't attract me,
Yeah.
I'm not gravitating towards some of the profiles that maybe aren't best being followed potentially. Who also, incidentally, though, tend to have huge followings. But yeah, I think you have to use a bit of common sense. If it seems too good to be true, it very often is, isn't it? But I agree, going back to what you just said, that excitement at the beginning is so great, but it can feel overwhelming too. I think that has to be talked about too, because I think people really want to get started sometimes, but don't have that confidence to, don't actually take the step, maybe because of the overwhelm. It's a lot to take on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think and it does link to the whole social media thing. Is like, this is the new best thing that you need to do from a strategy point of view. And then it's really difficult when, and myself as well, like in the earlier stages, you're like, oh, should I be doing this? Oh, should I be doing that? And the reality of it is, as you know, I'm all about, right, well, pick the thing that aligns with what you're trying to build, and then just really dig down and just build that. Whereas I think when you're in the early stages, the overwhelm can come from like the shiny penny syndrome that everybody casts around. Just linking back to the showboaters as well, because, I love this subject, but if you've got a lot of followers, they've probably bought them. FYI. Do you know what I was thinking about there for you as well? Obviously, with your hair background, some of the best property businesses and people that I've known along the way are those that bring transferable skills in from the previous life. And I think for you, like working in hair, it's a very social role, isn't it? In terms of like, in the chair, you've a lot of characters, I imagine, like come in front of you all the time, and that would, I guess, give you a really good gauge about people and kind of like, how to communicate and how to like, read the room with people and stuff like that. Would you say that's a fair point?
Definitely. But I think what's interesting, and that most people wouldn't necessarily think about me, even people that actually know me like yourself, I'm definitely an introvert. That is my natural state. I like time on my own, peace and quiet. Like loud noises or prolonged noises definitely like trigger me. I struggle with that a bit. But I'm very sociable. So I think there's definitely like a scale of introverts, and maybe I'm not, too far into that scale, but I definitely am. But I'm very comfortable speaking to people. You can put me in a room with people that I don't know, and I'll find it easy enough to make conversation with everybody. But I think naturally that isn't my most comfortable state all the time. I think it's something that you have to do in this role sometimes as well. But I agree, that is definitely a transferable skill. I think this is interesting because people, I think, maybe can't see their own transferable skills, because I've had many conversations with people that think, oh, well, I'm doing this at the moment and it's nothing alike, and there's not much more different than, hairdressing to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great.
It's completely different. But that's a transferable skill. And then because I made the shift into the sales side of things, that is, negotiation skills and reading a room, that kind of environment, I can definitely relate now to what I'm doing. And also the project management side of things that came with, in my previous role, I would organise events and that kind of thing. And now just, a schedule of works and that kind of thing is where that links to nicely instead. But being organised, it comes across, that is another place where there is that transferable skill. So I think people maybe don't see their own sometimes, but there's normally, something that you can bring with you from a previous role, isn't there?
100%. I mean, my own story, like on paper, back in the day, stepping into the industry, I was like, well, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm never going to be any good at this, really.
Yeah.
But I soon realised through Instagram that actually my USP was design, and it's like, and being able to visualise and just be a natural disruptor. That's just who I am. So it's like, right, well, I'll really dig into that and I'll harness it. And I've managed to basically build an empire off the back of that skill. And I'm still not a mathematician, FYI, but my business partners are. Do you know? So it's like, it can be something that you think, oh, this isn't going to be the thing, but that can be the thing that opens up all the opportunities. So like, it's really good conversation to have, actually. And for anyone at the early stages, I would definitely say, like, think about that. Think about what that is. And it's with you, I'd never thought about it in that respect of like being a hairdresser, speaking to people, like, so that is such a superpower within itself. So yeah, definitely for me, I see it like that. So you're in the early stages of growing your portfolio. Okay. You're still at that point. You are pregnant with Archie actually at this point, aren't you? Yeah. You're pregnant with Archie. So first baby. So beginning of the business, what in terms of like challenges did you face? Like, what were the kind of like the good bits and the not so good bits that you faced?
I think looking back, I potentially couldn't have picked a worse time to get started in my own that moment in time for me, because I was pregnant, and I also do you remember I was building an extension. We were having an extension built at home.
And your bathroom renovated, and it wasn't straightforward, was it? And you were traveling a lot as well.
Live at home. We had to move. We moved out for 3 months, and I was traveling to Scotland and the northeast and wherever with work. And then I was like, oh, and in my evenings and weekends, I'll just start a business as well. So it was a real tricky time. So time for me, I think, was the biggest constraint. Then luckily when you're pregnant you can't really go out that much and do any partying, so I gained a bit of time back there. So yeah, my evenings and my weekends were dedicated to whatever I needed to be doing for House. And that was definitely a challenge.
Sorry, so basically time was your biggest challenge for you in your personal situation. So within that, how did you utilize the time that you had? How did you build to be able to really, make the most of that available time? Was it a systems thing? Was it?
It was a structure thing for me.
Yeah. So talk to me about that. What did that look like?
So I knew that I would have to work in my evenings if I was going to get this on. I knew that I was going to have to give up some of my weekend time, not all of it, but some of it, to be able to do it as well. But I think it was seen, everyone would think, oh God, she was working away as well, how do you find the time? But actually that was where I found the time. I was working away. So if I get to a hotel in an evening and I've got nothing to do for the evening, I'm not at home with Dan, or, I can't do anything for what's going on with the extension or whatever, I would basically work then, and I would get as much done as I could. Maybe I'd have a few hours run at it. So that was one place that I gained time back rather than seeing it as a negative. I turned that around and made it work for me. I also just was really structured, and I think having the accountability of working with yourself and knowing that I had things to do on, but I've achieved by that following week. I'm a fairly consistent person anyway. When I set my mind to something, I'm going to be doing it. But just having the time constraint of knowing, right, by this point I need to have got this sorted or figured out this issue, or made contact with that person, it was a good way to keep me on track and make sure that I was making progress week by week as well, which I do think was a very important thing. But the time, you have to make the time, don't you, if it's something that's important to you. Everyone can say that they've got no time, but I think you just have to carve it out. I listened to a podcast ages ago with Mike Clay, who was saying, he was saying that he'd carved out maybe like 20, I think from memory, it's something like 25 minutes in the morning and 25 minutes in a lunch break or something on some days. And you put all that together and it compounds to, hours in a week. That's huge. I think if you think of it like that, you can find time. It's just being committed to doing it sometimes. So that was where it came from for me. It wasn't like I had a full day every week or anything. It was using my time wisely where I could and being structured with it.
Yeah. I mean, I would have said this to you before, and I've said it to many people. Like, I built BEESPACE in nap times.
Yes,
I did, right? Like, literally. So, like, my babies were, 0 and 2 when I really got going with all of this. And lack of childcare, lack of nursery hours available. Yeah. And I've spoke about it in previous pods anyway, so people can listen to that. But it was hard, man. It was so hard. And I was up against the clock constantly, but I utilized every 20-minute period if someone was asleep, watching bloody Peppa Pig, like whatever I needed to do. Because you know what, like the reality of anybody in any situation, when you're building a business from scratch, regardless if it's a portfolio or selling canter beans, whatever, there's going to be a sacrifice initially.
Yeah.
And you've got to try and work that into whatever your day-to-day looks like. There's a pocket of time available to make those very small steps forward, those, just get those questions answered, get that thing ordered, like whatever those incremental steps forward are, there's a pocket somewhere to do it. And in the early stages, get ready, because you have to sacrifice, don't you?
You do. And it's getting your head around that, that there's going to be weeks.
It's not easy.
Where you don't feel like getting stuff done, but you just have to keep pushing on. Yeah. And I always say, don't like, if I felt like if I was making a small step forward or a big step forward in that time, so long as I was taking steps forward, then that was okay with me, because it was tough. It was tough to find, the right time and the right information. And, things do feel slow, don't they, in property at the best of times. So sometimes you just have to take that on the chin. But so long as I felt like I was taking a step forward of some size, then I was comfortable.
What I will say about you, because people, will always used to, always ask me about you and like as a mentee. Mm-hmm. And I always said about Laura, she turns up consistently. She asks smart questions. She gets shit done. She comes back. She asks more smart questions and she progresses forward. And you did all that whilst all of the stuff was happening, growing a child, renovation, up and down the country. I remember doing calls with you, and you're in your car, you're in this cafe, like you're on site with a massive bump, like this has happened, that's happened, but you just were so consistent, and that's such a great word for you. So that's really set the tone then for kind of like how things were for you at the beginning of doing what you now do, full time. So I guess it might be quite nice, actually, just talk us through a little bit. So your focus now is supported living primarily. Like, give us a bit of an insight into what that is in terms of a HMO strategy for you, and kind of like, what happens within it.
Yeah, okay. So when I started working on HMOs, it was professional only. And then there was kind of a moment where I felt like it was very much a buzzword for supported living, social housing being bandied around. So it was something that I researched quite a lot, spoke to some friends and contacts that were already using this strategy, and considered turning my very first HMO into a supported living, but decided against it. Got started, did a 5-bed and a 4-bed that were for professionals only, and then got the right properties came on the market, basically, that I could see an opportunity for with supported living. Because when I'm sourcing 2 different things if I'm doing, depending on which kind of project that I'm doing. And it just so happened that 2 projects back to back made sense to be supported living. And the same care provider took both of those properties off me on a 5-year lease within a couple of months of each other. By the time they both completed, and then renovation work was all finished and everything was handed over, there was maybe two, maybe 3 months between them being handed over. So that then gave me a real insight into both of them at the same time. And it was super interesting for me to have both of those within the HMO strategy, but both of those different versions available to me. So going forward, with our most recent project has been a 6-bed, again for professionals, and we are working on a bigger project at the moment, which is in planning, which we should discuss, that we've discussed doing both with. We've got 2 options. We can either go supported living. We've found a care provider for that is willing to take it off us. We've also got the option of keeping it for ourselves potentially as well. So there's, I basically run both of those alongside each other. So my strategy is purely HMOs, but it has a mixture of being for supported living and for professionals. And it's quite nice. I feel like it gives me a bit of variation within it. It also means that every time we do a supported living project, that it's more hands off and keeps the number of tenants down that we're dealing with, because I self-manage. So there is, I do have to think about the tenants at the back end once that project's live as well. So it is a bit of both actually for me at the moment, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm constantly keeping one eye on sourcing for both sides of things as well, and I do find that really interesting. However, I'd say that that's the thing that people get in touch with me about the most through social media and stuff, because I think everyone thinks it's an easy win, and I think it's portrayed as that online, but it's definitely not. And I think that's where people's interest, and they land on my page, see that I do supported living. That's where I seem to get a lot of questions from at the moment. But I am trying to keep one eye on both as we push forward.
So what's the pros and cons of supported living?
Pros are definitely that it's hands-off, or much more hands-off. So I have one person that I deal with for both of my properties. Say there was any issues at any of them, or if I had any questions about something, then I would just deal with her directly. So that's much easier than having, 8 tenants that I deal with individually. Maintenance is mostly taken care of. There are some parts that wouldn't be. I think everyone thinks everything's covered, but say something was wrong with the boiler or the guttering, on my agreements anyway, that is still on me, but predominantly, small maintenance bits are taken care of for me. And no voids would be another pro. Obviously, you've got your
grail
agreement.
Of HMO.
You've got that reassurance that that's your payment and you're going to get that month in, month out for the next 5 years. I'd say the cons are that it's not, it doesn't cash flow as high an amount as a professional HMO would. And the lending can be much trickier at the back end, especially, and this is what people that are just starting out don't understand, I think, is that can be more difficult anyway, but it can be especially difficult if somebody was just getting started and they didn't have landlord experience, and specifically HMO landlord experience. The number of lenders out there with an appetite to lend against these 5-year supported living leases is, massively reduced from what we would expect if we went to the whole of the market for a normal product. So there is that to consider. And also there's a lot of intricacies surrounding how vulnerable the tenants are and how that's classified. And then again, the lending that comes with that can be, it's not that it's not manageable, it's just that it's trickier to manage, basically. So they're the other difficulties that can come with it as well.
So just sticking on lending for a second, basically I would assume that washes out so that you pay more for it in the end ultimately. You do, you do. Although I feel like I felt really lucky with refinancing both of my projects last year, and I've not ended up with a terrible rate. I think I'm comfortable with where it is, but generally speaking, it would cost maybe approximately 0.5% more than normal HMO product.
This episode of the BEESPACE Podcast is kindly sponsored by the wonderful people at Landlord Furniture Co. Specialising in a huge range of high-quality bespoke furniture, Landlord Furniture Co. provides durable pieces designed to last in your rental properties. If you're searching for the perfect furniture to attract professional HMO tenants, or need more resilient pieces for your student accommodations, considering cost-effective furniture packs for a larger property, or looking for something more personalised to elevate your serviced accommodation brand, whatever your need, Landlord Furniture Co. will craft a solution for you. You can say goodbye to rubbish old flat packs and start investing in a luxurious experience for your tenants. Backed by a 3-year warranty and exceptional customer service, they really are the smart choice for any landlord or property developer out there who takes their properties, their tenants and their business seriously. So ready to transform your spaces with Landlord Furniture Co. and ensure that your investments stand out in the market? Visit Landlord Furniture Co. today at www.landlordfurnitureco.co.uk, or you can head to their showroom, which is in Oldham, or find them over on Instagram at Landlord Furniture Co. Now, let's get back to the episode.
And just on that as well, for anybody that's new, fresh going into this, even on the smaller HMO stuff, lending will be harder because you don't have the landlord experience.
Exactly.
So that's why, like one of my mantras that I bang on about is to steadily grow your portfolio in size order. So exactly as you did, buy to let, flipped, small HMO, 3, 4, 5, 6, you've gone up. So from a lender's point of view, they can go, she's done it right for the past 4 years. She's steadily built a portfolio up. It's all, we can see it all there. They like that. They really like that. So that's a real positive. If you just come, fresh into it, I've done a planning gain into supported living, the lenders are going to be like, okay, right. So that's going to just reduce. So that's just something for somebody to potentially think about without going off on too much of a tangent.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the expectation to be there that even when it is manageable, there's very often a lot of hoops to be jumping through to make sure that it happens.
Honestly, and do you know what? That I don't know if you feel this, but I absolutely feel that the most probably in the past 18 months to a year, even with all of our experience, the hoops are getting tighter and more frequent. And it's like, really? So it's definitely... having an amazing relationship with your broker is definitely something to nail in the early stages.
even right, just as we were about to complete on something recently, just about to complete, the date was set.
That's ridiculous, that is.
We need this, brilliant. Okay. I mean, obviously we do it, we make it work, but it can be frustrating, definitely.
So just a little bit about your charity that you're working with. What kind of are you able to sort of tell us what sort of tenants they are, what their situation is?
So the charity that I work with, I think the important thing for me is that that if somebody was getting started in supported living, one of the conversations I'd want to be having is to understand what their tenant demographic is. So we don't need to know exactly why people are living in the house. We just need to know what their care needs are going to be. So, for example, do we need to adapt the premises in any way? Do we need disabled access? Do we need handrails for extra things? All these kinds of things need to be discussed and thoroughly understood. So the care provider that I'm working with do not need any adaptations making to the property. Another question for me was, in terms of a 4-bed house, how many bathrooms and toilets, that kind of thing, would they require? How much furniture, for example? On my plans for both of mine, I had plans for like sofas and armchair in the living room, which I was advised not to put in by this particular company. They didn't want or need that. They prefer to just have a dining table with like great area for dining table and chairs, great kitchen. They're not so worried about that because they don't feel like their tenants are going to socialise together in that space anyway. So there's things like that is really important to understand when you're getting started, because with the best will in the world, you could go, right, I'm going to turn this into a 4-bed HMO and I'm going to do 1 bathroom for all of them because that's what this other person's done. But if you've not checked with your care provider that that's what they're comfortable with, they may only take properties that are all en suites, for example, which I know some of them do. It needs to be right for the care provider and what they are using your property for. And also that then very often links to the how high risk that the tenants are seen as. So for example, for my property, there's no adaptations to make. There's nobody that lives in with them either. They don't have 24-hour support. So that brings that from a lending point of view, they would see that as a lower risk, for the tenant demographic as well.
Okay, interesting. So if somebody's, really thinking, right, this is for me, how do they go about identifying a charity? Where do they start?
I think networking is a good way to find out who's already doing it, maybe in your area, using any contacts that you've got that may already be doing that. Also speaking to your local council. We speak to our local HMO officer as well and see who she works with and who she's comfortable with working with as well.
That's a good idea,
because that's really helped us. And just maybe using forums and things like that. It feels like a bit of a needle in a haystack at times, I think. And where these care providers used to have used to be wanting to take on houses because they needed properties and they needed to get landlords on board that would work with them. Now, from what I can tell, is they are constantly bombarded by landlords wanting to hand over properties. Yeah. So it's a very different scenario for them now. So they almost have a lot of the time like a gatekeeper that stops you, getting through. So I think if you do want to speak to some like a care provider and have a conversation with them, don't be disheartened by not making contact the first time that you try. Don't just send an email and expect somebody to come back, because there's an awful lot of people going to be doing the exact same thing. So you're going to need to be, I would say you probably need to be consistent in your approach if you're wanting to work with someone. If you find someone that you think would work for you, you have to be consistent in making contact with them and try to set up a meeting, have a conversation, see if it would work with the property that you've got in mind, and then see if it works for them as well.
Do you think that is a bit of a repercussion of it being the new best thing to do, property online, and everyone's gone, I'm going to do supported living, and then it's like, or maybe there's a little bit of, like we mentioned before, a lot of buy-to-let landlords trying to find a different way to make buildings work. And do you think it's a combination of all of that?
I think it's a combination. Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a buzzword.
Sounds like
for a while. People seem to be interested in it because I think it's sold as, when I say sold, I mean like talked about and talked online in the way as though it's just super easy. It's hands off. You get paid for nothing. And you don't have to do a lot to the property. And well, we still do, we're still doing back to brick on them, full fire system, fire doors, all those kinds of things. So we're still doing them to a spec that my brand would be proud of. It still has to be done in that way. So for us, we're coming at this from a really, a really sensible mindset. If we want to hand over something that's great for them, and that is going to mean that the same care providers would want to work with us repeatedly, which has obviously already happened. I'm going to kind of hone that relationship and then potentially keep working with the same people. I think that's how it needs to be looked at, not I don't have to spend very much on this and I can never make contact again and they do all my maintenance. Like, it's really the wrong mindset, I think, personally.
I mean, I've been around a while now. Everything's sold like that, and none of it actually, the reality is like that, because you know what, it is a business. Property development is a legit business with loads of different moving parts, whatever those parts may be, and therefore they can be problematic and so on and so forth. So nothing's that straightforward and simple, is it? That's really good, Laura. That gives us like a really good kind of like opening into, what supported living is about, what the day-to-day looks like, the type of charity you might partner with, so on and so forth. I know a lot of people that come into my world are interested in it because it aligns with potentially their value set of giving back as well, and kind of knowing that they're going to provide a product that is of an elevated standard that can help and genuinely support somebody in a situation. And I think that there's a lot of alignment for people there. So like really, searching out for those good people that are like, you made your initial contact with someone in your network that was working with the charity that aligned with you. There's Tiff and Theo in Nottingham in my city from Renee House, who do incredible stuff, who I always kind of point people to, because there are some rogues in the industry in that part of the world as well. So it's really important, isn't it, to find the right partner up with the right people that absolutely align with your value set.
Definitely.
So that's amazing that you've kind of really dug into that and grown. It's helped grow as well. So obviously, you're a woman in a very male-dominated industry. You're now a mum of two. You've got two now, so you've also been busy doing that over the past few years. How have you found being a female in the industry?
It's not something that's really fazed me. But I don't know if that's because I was very conscious to surround myself with the right people from the offset that I could, network with, lean on for support. And I think that's really huge. So you do feel it. For example, walking into a networking event sometimes as a female, especially if it's a busy one, can feel quite overwhelming. There's probably going to be more males in that room than females. But I think I I think I'm okay with it generally. Sure, sometimes it feels a bit overwhelming. But that being said, I think some of the guys that I have worked with, and again, I choose carefully, but, you know, some of the rooms I've been in, I'm thinking like to the mastermind last year and stuff, some of the most supportive people, male or female, you know, that I've been surrounded by, and everybody has been there to offer guidance and experience where it's been needed by me. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? I know it's overwhelming sometimes, and I think if I stopped and thought about it, it might be more off-putting. But because I just immerse myself in it and make sure that I align with the right people, it doesn't feel like an issue for me, to be totally honest.
What about dealing with trades? Because obviously that is a very masculine world. And as a woman, that's often, you know, a lot of people that, you know, mentees and clients of mine, that's their biggest struggle.
Yeah.
What's your advice with working with trades? Yeah, it's a confidence thing, because when there's a knowledge gap about the process, and then you're in that world is super masculine, you know, there can often be like that can be the hardest part as you're learning, in particular, of the process of build. Like, what would your advice be to somebody in that situation? How to manage that?
I think if we take a step back from being before we're on site, I think my advice would be to arm yourself with the right support and the right people and mentor, or, you know, whatever the, you know, group that whatever feels comfortable to you, to know what you're going into when you go in on site before you even get to that stage. I think you need to have the support right from the very beginning, personally. Even, you know, sourcing the deals and everything, I think it's so important. But I think if you know why you're going on site and you know what you're looking for, even if that's just this week, I need to go on site and I need to check that the windows are in, you know, or, you know, what's going on with the windows. Are they on site? Have they been delivered? Are they being fitted? That kind, just as an example. I think if you've got the right support and you can go into that thinking, okay, right, I've spoken to my support and I need to be checking this, and this. Because I think otherwise, part of it when you walk in, you're not confident because you maybe don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
If you know what you're looking for and you can speak with like a level of assertiveness and understanding, because let's be honest, do you remember how many questions I would ask?
and I remember you asking me a question once about extractors, and I'm like, Laura, this is too far. It was like it was a really nuanced question about extractors. I was like, I actually don't know the answer to this. Let me go and ask somebody.
I don't know, Laura, and I don't really care. But like, I think for me,
we did get the answer though, didn't we? And you did. It was something like some wiring on this particular type of extractor. I was like, wow, this girl does detail well.
But I think for me, maybe having that level of confidence on site in that environment comes from having a good understanding. So I want to know, you know, how much this costs. I will always say, and now as well, the team that I've worked with most recently, and I'll say questions like, okay, so I understand the process from here. What can I expect to see in the next 2 weeks? And I'm not asking them that to put anybody on the spot. I'm asking that so that in my head I understand it. But then they know as well, and probably off the back of that, they know that I've got an understanding of, you know, of what's coming. So if it feels comfortable to ask questions like that rather than, you know, feeling uncomfortable on site. I've never asked questions either in, you know, when I've been sourcing things and I've been speaking to, you know, electricians or whoever. No one's ever said, I'm not telling you that. You know, everybody will help you and point you in the right direction, I think, as much as possible. I found anyway. So, but I think you need to have the right support. If you're trying to do this all on your own, you've never had a mentor, you've never been in a networking group, you've not got somebody that's, you know, holding your hand and showing you the way, and you're doing your first ever HMO project, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're out of your depth. But I think it's about having the right support and coming at things with a level of confidence, which only grows and grows over years. You know, I think back to that first buy-to-let that I did, and to where I am now, the growth for me personally is huge. Yeah, Langfield.
I don't know how I remember that, but I
do. From there to where I am now, is very different. But I think it's from having the support at the beginning. And I do think it's huge in terms of confidence, definitely.
Yeah. What I will say about build process is, like out of all the different strategies, let's say, HMO in particular is complex as a build process alone, because by the nature of the beast, we're asking a lot of the space. So therefore, all at one point there's multiple trades overlapping, and if one of those chess pieces comes out of line, or someone doesn't turn up that day, or someone doesn't communicate that, like, it can be a problem.
And then adding to the mix of that all the regulations that the council impose on that said building, with all of the stuff we're trying to make it do, and we've got to tick every single box that the council have got. It can be overwhelming, can't it? It can be a lot. But I think for me it's just about support,
knowledge around you.
Always.
I also do think though that, like, people step into the industry and think that overnight they're all of a sudden like a property development / building expert. And it's like, no, it's like any other profession. You've got to learn the craft. You've got to ask the questions. You've got to make the mistakes. You've got to learn from those mistakes. And it's like, no one's expecting you to be an expert, but you spot on with what you say, like, surround yourself with those people that have got the experience and ask those questions, because that will just save you money, right? In the long term, it'll help you go faster and it'll save you money. So no, that's really, really good to know. So
I think as well, having people that are way ahead of you in terms of where they're at, but also having people that are at the same stage as you, because I think if you're in a room or a group or whatever with people that are all further ahead than you, it's inspiring, but it's sometimes difficult to sit and think, God, how's that going to happen for me? Where if you've got people at the beginning at your point, make contact with them, speak to them, send messages, and keep each other going, that can definitely help as well. I think that's massive, to not get too overwhelmed with what other people are doing. You need to be able to see 10 steps down the road, but you also need people at your level as well.
Definitely in those early stages, having that connection is imperative, for sure. I agree completely. So what does the future look like for you then? What does the future look like for your brand, for Haus? What's the big vision?
The big vision is to keep using the HMO strategy and keep using both supported living and the professional approach. So having a mixture of the two different within HMOs. Me and Dan, would like ideally to get to 100 rooms. That's the goal. But when we first set this goal, it was to be done in 5 years. And I still think we could do that. I don't know necessarily that I want to do that right now. I know it's a conversation that we've had before. The juggle of having children and a business is so difficult. I mean, I know the juggle of having children and a job is tough, but I think when it's your own business, you never switch off from it, especially in the early stages when you're developing it and growing it. And last year, I think I took on too much, definitely did take on too much, especially whilst going through my second pregnancy as well. And, these little babies are not little babies for very long, are they? And I want to be around enough that I don't look back on this time and think, God, I worked too much. But I also want to keep things pushing forward. So, for example, we have got a property that we've been in planning for an 8-bed for recently, so that would add another 8 rooms to our portfolio. However, for anyone that does follow along on socials, that has just been rejected. So we're tweaking. It was very, very vague, but it was basically the planning officer's opinion that it wouldn't be a nice living environment for the 8 people living within the building, because the communal space was too small. But it was just under 35 square meters between 2 rooms. So we don't think it is on that. We think it is based on an emotional feeling towards HMOs rather than actually the build that we were planning to put together. So we're looking at tweaking that application at the moment. And
so
we're just more.
I was going to say, you're going to go to appeal with that, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to appeal it, but because they take so long as well, we're also going to